These files were never meant to be public, but someone reopened them. This is the Dark Bureau. From the outside, it appeared little more than a spiritual utopia, a swirl of promise, wellness retreats on hidden islands, people dressed in white, and a program of alternative therapies promising deep transformation. Brochures spoke of detox cleanses in rainforests and chakra realignment on sun-soaked beaches, marketing journeys of self-actualization to the lost, the curious, and the wealthy alike. In online testimonials, followers reported epiphanies, new clarity, release from personal traumas. Yet behind hand-carved gates and calming digital portals, a far more complex reality unfurled, one where money and power flowed in invisible currents that joined 3 continents together. If hundreds of millions in donations and retreat support were changing hands every year, it remained unclear why so little reached the villages, schools, and clinics the Brotherhood claimed to champion. For all its images of giving, the flow of resources traced strange shapes across the map. Huge sums surged into the system, only to dissolve into consulting fees and licensing rights, vanishing before anyone at the grassroots ever saw them. It began innocently enough. In the early 2000s, a small group gathered on a remote Pacific atoll, seeking to form a community around a simple belief. Every person contains sleeping wisdom, which, if awakened, will heal both self and society. At first, there were open-air circles, communal meals, shared chores, and organic farming. But as the group grew in reputation, magnetic personalities, skilled both in spiritual rhetoric and in persuasion, took charge. What started as a spiritual experiment hardened into a system. Leaders maintained that genuine advancement required both effort and sacrifice, mixing ancient mythologies and New Age ideas. Membership soon demanded more than a state of mind. It required regular donations, purchase of bespoke workshops, and financial contributions to community projects. As money entered, so did regulations. Each person must ascend through ranks, gaining permission for certain teachings by recruiting others and making set payments, coded as energy exchanges, ritual gifts, or growth pledges. The group's early expansion mirrored social movements, but borrowed the pace and practices of modern franchises. Chapter Home sprouted across the Australian coast and Californian deserts, across Singapore, through the mountain valleys of Vancouver, and into the busy streets of Manila and Bali. Founded ostensibly as temples for healing, these outposts became both spiritual hubs and regional administrative offices. Each had a clear mandate: organise regular workshops, conduct recruitment drives, and oversee the intake of money and resources. The architecture blended the ritual, meditation domes, altars, aromatherapy rooms, with the deeply transactional, locked finance cabinets, tablets for onboarding, and nightly reporting to Oceania-based controllers. Structured like an agile corporation, regional chapters operated under detailed policy manuals, dictating everything from scriptural quotes to KPI targets for growth pledges and retreat refer a friend bonuses. Members were promised more than belonging. For those who played by the rules and contributed, there was a model for self-realization. Ambassador status and higher, complete with access to inner circle teachings, a share of income from new recruits, and discounted rates for elite retreats. Yet the requirements spelled out in annual contracts and digital dashboards were exacting. Every step towards spiritual ascent needed financial sacrifice, a mix of recurring donations, mandatory purchase of training materials, and quotas for bringing in new prospects. The boundaries between spiritual growth and salesmanship blurred. With each new workshop or cleanse, participants were pulled further into a fiscal web, where progress up the ranks depended as much on money moved upward as on any doctrinal understanding or demonstration of healing skills. The system's appeal, ironically, was its structure. In the chaos of the modern world, few could resist the lure of an orderly path, especially when couched in transcendent language and camouflaged as personal empowerment. Much like legacy pyramid organizations, the Brotherhood shielded itself with fancier trappings: brand design, updated websites, globally coordinated events. Digital tools accelerated their reach beyond anything physical alone could accomplish. By 2012, a dedicated digital team ran sophisticated platforms, a members-only online portal for making donations and upgrades, live-streamed Connect sessions to keep people recursively engaged, targeted social advertising pipelines built around personality quizzes and mystical assessments. Recruitment spilled beyond physical chapters, mushrooming in email inboxes and algorithmic timelines across borders, language barriers melting in the wash of viral videos and influencer testimonials. A new generation of graduates, those initiated into the Golden Ring, were flown to island summits, trained and dispatched as travelling emissaries, each tasked not only with bringing in cash-rich retreat attendees, but with using psychological techniques to identify and nurture high-value recruits. Enrolments soared. Microtransactions for digital events, ranking ceremonies, and merchandising bit by bit funneled vast sums towards central accounts, routed through payment processors and ever-changing shell entities in Fiji, Samoa, and Lloyd's offshore intermediaries. Financial oversight by design remained fragmented. From the outside, donations looked voluntary, spending on workshops appeared legitimate, but inside, bespoke accounting software tracked every pledge, every recurring payment, every successful friend referral, slicing income streams off for central redistribution. The public explanation emphasised charity, clean water campaigns, disaster relief funds, new schools, and clinics. In truth, many of these projects materialised only briefly. Clinics were opened with gala events, media coverage, and ribbon cutting, but quietly shuttered within months. Rural schools, where banners featured the Brotherhood crest, would see little support after initial photos were taken and campaign videos filmed. Forensic reviews later revealed that money earmarked for these projects merged rapidly into administrative overhead, consulting fees, regional licensing, and leadership bonuses, flowing through a latticework of holding companies designed to blur true ownership and to defeat external audit. On the individual level, the costs were steep. Testimonials from former insiders painted a picture of subtle coercion. New members arriving for healing or to escape trauma quickly found that progress required steady investment, not just in dollars, but in social capital, inviting friends and family, submitting to hierarchical scrutiny, justifying sacrifices in pursuit of a status that turned out to be ephemeral. Some emptied savings, others borrowed from relatives, quitting jobs or selling property in the belief that their pain had meaning if it bought them enlightenment, or at least a sense of belonging. The most committed paid so others could attend. In some cases, members went without food or healthcare, so fees could be kept current and advancement not miss a beat. By the middle of its tenure, the true scale of the Brotherhood's operations was too large for any one country to account for. Concerned families and isolated former members sent tips and complaints to authorities in multiple jurisdictions, but no one agency, journalist or watchdog could see the whole web. In Oceania, anonymous whistleblowers, risking retaliation, leaked internal training manuals, annual financial statements, and payment rosters to reporters and eventually to law enforcement. In Canada and Australia, financial regulators began to notice patterns. Banks flagged clusters of payments always coded under wellness or therapy, repeatedly cycling to offshore accounts in the South Pacific. Evidence of unlicensed alternative therapy centres arose across Southeast Asia, where authorities saw clusters of suspicious cross-border transfers into chapters registered as religious organisations, often immune to certain audits. Journalistic investigations, sparked by the leaks and emboldened further by court-ordered data releases, traced tentacles city by city, uncovering a coordinated international effort to mask resource flows. Analysts constructed detailed diagrams, how the money entered as donations or workshop fees, how it was washed through internal consultancies and expenses, how each regional outpost was both a source and a pass-through. In more detail, forensic accountants discovered circular financing, donations routed through a daisy chain of consulting firms and shell companies, invoices raised for non-existent services, all designed to reduce or erase taxable income and to insert layers of plausible deniability between the donors and the controlling council. Investigators reconstructed the forgotten philanthropic projects, unearthing a pattern. The ones that lasted were those that served internal recruitment or branding. Elsewhere, a pattern of short-lived, heavily publicized initiatives suggested charity was more narrative than substance. Victims and ex-members, many anonymously, stepped forward, emboldened by the beginnings of institutional scrutiny. Their stories described high-pressure environments in retreat settings, highly skilled facilitators who paired language of healing with the tools of salesmanship, a sliding scale of ritual obligations, each escalating in demand. Psychological coercion, it became clear, rested not on overt threat, but on the gradual swapping of financial and spiritual metrics, making non-payment or slow recruitment appear as personal failures or as signs of lost enlightenment. Those who refused or faltered became subject to ostracism, legal threats, and isolation. Communities dissolved overnight, with skeptical members blacklisted in social networks, mocked in community forums, or quietly removed from communal housing for energy imbalance. The price of doubt was, for many, exile from the only support system they had left. Against the backdrop of these mounting narratives, law enforcement on several continents began to assemble a picture of both the institution and its methods. By 2021, a series of joint task forces involving banking regulators, anti-money laundering squads, and a newly formed coalition of investigative journalists traced the ownership links between the Brotherhood's inner council and an elaborate web of at least 30 different legal entities spanning half a dozen tax havens. Asset freezes originated out of Australia, then spread to the Philippines and on to Canada, interdicting funds in accounts linked by bundled payment activity to dozens of therapy centres. Undercover operatives in retreat settings described organised campaigns to upsell healing journeys, pressure attendees into recurring upgrades, and exploit the vulnerable, grief-stricken, isolated, or merely hopeful for salvation. Legal records began to show a consistent pattern. Donations intended for disaster relief or medical outreach were diverted to purchase luxury properties, finance council member travel, or underwrite premium tier retreats for inner circle loyalists. Investigators matched fake invoices to flows of cash. When pressed, leaders invoked religious freedom and charity protections, stonewalling audits and harassing whistleblowers. The reperning of these structures revealed too the overload and fragility of the global systems meant to contain them. Payment processors, tasked with policing fraud, were overwhelmed by volume and the plausible legitimacy of health and wellness transactions. It took years for patterns to emerge across international accountancy frameworks, by which point the scale of laundering was irreversible. Media scrutiny, once ignited, grew relentless. Lawsuits multiplied. Civil society advocacy groups, noting the wider pattern of economic abuse hidden under spiritual branding, demanded both criminal prosecution and psychological support for survivors. Legislatures in Australia, Canada, the Philippines and Singapore conducted public hearings. Legal reforms followed swiftly. Lawmakers closed long-standing loopholes that had allowed multi-level marketing tactics in spiritual or wellness organisations to operate with impunity, introducing compulsory reporting, external auditing, and clearer definitions of psychological coercion and fraudulent use of religious donation status. As the law closed in, the Brotherhood's leaders proved adaptive, but not immune. Some went into hiding, changing names and disappearing into new spiritual economies. Properties, luxury lodges, rural compounds, retreat boats were seized or abandoned, their value recycled into restitution and survivor trust funds. Banking authorities clawed back a fraction of lost money, but the scale of loss dwarfed repatriated assets. Governments redirected what they could into community health centres and programs for trauma recovery, assembling support networks for former members now adrift, wages garnished, or trust in any form of organised spirituality shattered. The social footprint, however, lingered. Among regulators and institutional watchdogs, the Brotherhood was now held up as a cautionary model. The combination of high-tech recruitment, transnational banking, and sophisticated psychological engagement offered a playbook for a new generation of hybrid spiritual financial organisations. Even as the power structure faded, media features and government white papers warned that dozens of similar groups, often much smaller, were likely operating beneath the surface. Survivor advocacy networks, many founded by those burned in the Brotherhood's wake, shared best practices. Trauma counselling, legal aid, financial literacy training for ex-members, even peer-run hotlines for families at risk of being drawn into similar webs. For all the investigations, lawsuits and new laws, the most enduring legacy of the Brotherhood of the Snake lay in the lesson it forced on its survivors and on society. Spiritual longing, especially when married to organisational agility and unchecked digital fundraising, could bypass traditional safeguards and create closed systems that both enriched and imprisoned. The lure of certainty and belonging remains powerful, but can, if manipulated, leave scars deeper than any fraudulent investment. As new organisations learn from the Brotherhood's playbook, institutions, policymakers and communities are left to answer a difficult challenge: how to welcome genuine spiritual innovation, while building the scrutiny and support needed to prevent exploitation masquerading as enlightenment.